complex fitness. Ba-da-da-da-da-da.
Alright, so today we're going to look at a common question I get primarily from field athletes, which is increasing your vertical jump, or how to do that. And we're going to go over some points just like the last one. So what I'm going to look at is a few different things, just a step-by-step of getting a higher jump. So we're going to break it down to understanding the goal, supporting the goal, considerations to make, and then practical applications for yourself just at the very end. So the number one training principle is specificity, and that remains still for here. So when people have a specific goal such as this, or sprinting, or increasing their squat, they tend to look at everything else but the actual activity. So specificity dictates that if you want to get better at something, you do more of the something. So whether that's getting a better bench press, you bench more or more often. A better squat, you squat more or squat more often. You want to learn a language, you practice the language more or more often. It's as simple as that. So specificity cannot be overlooked. Common question: what is the best exercise for a high jump? This is a common question that I have gotten over the last few years. My usual response, well, in the last year or more, is, have you tried jumping? That is number one. It seems blatantly obvious, but that is the point of this whole thing. So moving to another point, just for some context, if you wanted to run a marathon or compete in a 100-meter race, how would you train? The bulk of your training would be doing the thing to get you closer to the goal. So running your short sprints or running your long distances. It's that simple. So rationally, you would only really look at strength work to support, supplement, or complement your goals rather than dictate the outcome. So why should we treat jumping differently? If the goal was to sprint or run a marathon, you'd look at your strength training. They'd look quite different, but to round them both up, you'd look at it to support your goal. You'd look at it to increase your ligament and tendon strength, your resilience, your bone density, keep injuries at bay or mitigate the chance of injuries and things like that. You wouldn't look at it to dictate your time or dictate how well you do in that. You would look toward your running specific training. So jumping should be seen or should be viewed the same. What do the studies show? There's a hell of a lot of studies on this, so I'm going to go through just a basic one with you. I'm not going to go through the basic study. I'm going to go through an example of one with you guys. So option 1, you've got a strength program. Option 2, you've got a strength program with jumps incorporated into it. So let's say on week 0 and week 12, they test their jumps either end. Who do you think is going to get a better jump? The group that are doing a strength program, they just test their jump, go through a strength program, and then test their jump again. Or option 2, the group 2 who are doing a strength program, jumping along the way and test their jumps again. You know, like, it's pretty simple to figure out which one's going to do better. So we see time and time again, those who jump and practice plyometrics get better jumps. Jumps and plyometrics are not exactly the same thing, but that's a topic for another day. Another part of those studies, which is important, is the strength work. So getting generally strong is always a good idea. So a strength program is still important. It is important to get strong. So repeating getting strong is a good idea and always is a good idea, especially when it comes to your athletic potential. But this is where I see a lot of fault in it. So don't depend on a singular specific lift. So people say a front squat to get a better vertical jump. Instead of deadlifting, use a trap bar deadlift to get a better vertical jump. And it comes down to quite a few things, from your ability to complete the movement, your exercise or training history, your training age, things like that all should be taken on board. So don't depend on a specific skill or specific lift that it isn't jumping to get you a better jump. Focus on getting generally strong all over. So that would look like increasing your lower body strength, midline strength, upper body strength. You're pulling, you're pushing, you're hinging, you're squatting, you're carrying, all these simple things. Just focus on getting strong all over. Do the jumps with it and you'll be golden. So even there's been studies that have compared a full range of motion squat, nearly ass to grass, versus partial squats and just above parallel squats. And what they've both shown is that as long as you are getting strong in that range of motion that you're training in, as well as practicing the skill of jumping, the outcomes do not differ that much across the board at all. So what that can tell us is that as long as you're jumping and as long as you're getting strong, you're going to be improving your jump. So I would still advise training through a full or a greater range of motion where possible, just for mobility purposes, quality of movement down the line. Obviously, I feel it's better to train through a greater range of motion, and for using more musculature, like a full range of motion squat, you're going to use a few more muscles than a partial squat, and that's just the fact of it. So considerations to make. We're going to go through 3 here. So if you're a field athlete, jumping onto a box is more of a test of mobility, to be honest. So seeing as most people can jump very high and tuck their knees up under their chin and land into a deep squat in a box, that doesn't really tell me how high you can jump. Yes, obviously if someone can jump 40 inches like that, it's pretty impressive, or 50 inches or whatever. But what I really would like to see is your center of mass get higher. So your goal should be to get a higher center of mass, not just to get your high feet. If you're landing in a steep squat position up onto a box, you're not really improving the outcome or the goal of getting a higher center of mass, especially as it translates to field sports. I've never seen anyone jump for a ball and bring their knees up to their chest to catch it. So again, kind of practical application, you kind of want to just learn to land with a stiff leg and jump with a bit more of a stiff leg as well. Another consideration is the frequency. So moderate to high frequency, they say. I'll just say moderate because moderate's different to different people, and high frequency is different to different people as well. So moderate frequency and a lower volume tends to work best for improving your jump. So 2 to 3 times a week, as in 2 to 3 days a week, in a range of 5 to 10 jumps or plyos is plenty for most. Put those at the start of your workout when you're fresh, when you can produce the most power. Make sure the rest is long enough, make sure the quality is there, and just small doses are perfect. If you're doing 50 box jumps at the end of a workout, you're not going to improve your power, and it's a glorified conditioning session at that stage. Then lastly, prioritize training the muscle fibers needed to perform. So your fast twitch muscle fibers, that is your anaerobic system, just your explosive strength, things like that. Things like short sprints, jumps, plyometrics can help. But you must practice training that energy system so it can bleed into your jumps and bleed into producing that output. So the last thing I touch on here is the stretch, shorten and cycle work. So this can all be put into fast twitch fiber work as well, and practicing plyometrics. Just in short, again, it's going to be a whole slide series on its own. Stretch, shortening, cycle work is when a muscle is lengthened and then it rapidly shortens. So imagine you're holding a deep squat and then you rapidly explode upwards. So a squat jump. It's when a muscle is lengthened and then rapidly shortens. Misconstrued information is the next thing. So in order for me to get to, a lot of people add weight to their jumps, and I can say they do. It makes sense. It totally makes sense in most people's head why you'd add weight to a jump, but we're going to go through kind of why it's counterintuitive, and we'll start here. So this is going to come across as obvious in the first bit, but it'll lead into it. So it's rational to think that adding more weight to an exercise will get you stronger at that exercise when it comes to strength. Obviously, that's obvious. So if your 1 rep max back squat is 100 kg, 80 kg is going to feel quite heavy for you. But if your 1 rep max is 150 kg, 80 kg will feel quite light to you. Again, it's rational thinking. So if your 1 rep max is 100 kg, 80 kg is 80%. If your 1 rep max is 150 kg, 80 kg is only between 50 and 60%. So it's way down there, so it's going to feel easier. And this stems the belief that adding weight to a jump will result in higher jumps once you peel away the weight. But we're going to unpack that now. So this is where it becomes counterintuitive. So when it's the same with sprinting, but we're just talking jumping now. When specifically jumping, looking at the goal, which is to utilize our fast twitch muscle fibers, produce as much force as we possibly can, therefore getting as high as we can, and learning to adapt to that and expose ourselves to that, it becomes counterintuitive to add weight, because as soon as we add weight to that, you can no longer produce that rapid amount of force. So you can no longer produce that big a force in that short a time due to having this extra load. And this is where I first heard of this actually wasn't too long ago, off a channel called Seeker Strength. And you'll find their videos on YouTube. They're brilliant, but they've gone through something like this, and it's where I actually heard the name for it, which is a theory called the maximal dynamic hypothesis output, which suggests that lower limbs put out most power with body weight alone, meaning that adding weight is actually counterintuitive. And they also talk about this in depth with sprinting and other stuff as well. So the roundup is the last thing I'm going to go on to. And before I get onto that, so where most people fall back is they add weight to their jumps, they jump. And then, of course, in your head, you think, if I peel this weight away, I'm going to jump higher. As you do with gaining strength, obviously adding weight is usually a good thing. But when you're exposing yourself to wanting to jump higher, your goal in training should be jumping higher and producing that force and recruiting those muscle fibers. But you can't do that if you're bearing weight in your hands, or if you're adding weight to your frame. You can't produce as much force, therefore you're not getting that exposure. So that's where it stems from. So the roundup, just going to break it into 5 points and then I have a video at the end. So number 1, getting stronger is always a good thing, as we said at the start. So overload, progressively overload. Don't depend on a single lift. Obviously, if you prefer a single lift, look, getting a bigger squat and jumping, or getting a bigger deadlift or bigger whatever is going to help. But just focus on getting strong all over. That's all you really need to do for that, as long as you're jumping with it. Implement some fast twitch work into your program. So an example could be max sprints on an assault bike or a rower or on your feet. No more than 8 seconds with a 3-minute rest minimum. There's just an example. Of course, you could do jumps and stuff as well, which brings me on to point 3. Implement jumps and plyometric work into your program 2 to 3 days a week for 5 to 10 reps. So another thing that can be added together is step 2 and 3 there. You could train your fast twitch muscle fibers by doing jumps and plyometrics, so keep that in mind. Then to bring 4 into it as well, you could put them all into one group, and you could work on your stretch shortening cycle in the gym. So parallel squatting to an explosive jump will mean that you're going from a lengthened position into a rapidly shortened position. So again, step 2, 3 and 4 can all be shortened into one. I see people working with dynamic box squats quite a bit, where they get maybe 40% of their 1 rep max. The bars in their back, they're slowly down, they touch the box, explode up. Right there you have, if you do 3 of those reps under control, that is about 8 seconds of work usually. So there you cover your fast twitch muscle fibers, you're moving a light enough weight, you're working your stretch shortening cycle. And then of course, people pair that with plyometrics and jumps as sort of a contrast training. But yeah, these are all different techniques you can use. And then the last one is facilitation. So facilitation, I haven't talked on it yet. Again, hopefully it'll be its own PowerPoint, but it's a tool worth using, especially according to all the studies. It's with the aid of a band or a pulley to promote higher jumps, and it helps you with your training contractions. So it helps you, your central nervous system, it helps your musculature to get those contractions to jump higher than you are allowed to. So I'm going to show it in the next video. This will take a second or two to load. So your goal is to produce as much output. What this will do is, using a pulley or a band will allow you to jump higher than you could on your own. Again, facilitating you to do so. So just going to press play on this and we'll see. Here, tight grip. You can see I squat quite deep into it and I explode up. I had paired this with deadlifts. So I was moving the deadlifts for 3 reps quite fast in the space of 6 to 8 seconds. And then I was going straight into these facilitated high jumps. You can see I'm jumping much higher than I would be able to alone. And that is a facilitated jump. And that wraps up today's overview. I hope this helped and I hope you can take something from it. And if there's anything you would like to see me cover or any topics, just drop me a DM on my Instagram at Complex Fitness.